Well, good morning, everyone. It is February the 18th, and we have a few stories I'd like to talk about today. One is the big storm system over the west that's moving in, bringing snowfall levels down to as low as 300 to maybe 500 feet in some of these west coast areas. In fact, snowfall levels could drop as low as 150 feet here in Washington state as we get later into the weekend. Now, I do want to mention there is the severe weather potential here in parts of the Ohio Valley as we get into Thursday afternoon. There's enough convective available potential energy with this developing low pressure system over the state of Missouri as we get into the afternoon hours. But that's really just one side of the story. We're going to have snowfall on the northwest side of this developing low pressure system. And that's going to track into the Great Lakes, delivering 2 to 4 inches from Nebraska through Iowa and much of Wisconsin as we get into the day Friday. And then as we get into Friday afternoon, we're going to have another area of maybe 1 to 3 inches of snowfall that extends into places like New York State and the rest of New England. What's going to be kind of weird about this event for this time in February is that in the lower peninsula of Michigan, we're going to see mainly rainfall for you guys with this system. And that rainfall is going to extend back through much of the southeast for this particular storm. But that's enough of an introduction for now. Let's see what hour by hour this system is going to look like. We'll begin here on the west coast. Again, you can see early Thursday morning, we got a decent storm moving here into California. Got a lot of heavy mountain snowfall that's moving into Northern California and even down into the Sierra Nevada. At the same time, we have a significant trough that's moving into the Four Corners region. And we're going to have that cold air dive southward into parts of Arizona, parts of New Mexico. And this will bring snowfall to places like Flagstaff, right? And into western portions of Colorado. And again, this is providing significant but also beneficial snowfall locations that have received below average snowfall for much of the season. And over the central plains here, you can see the developing low pressure system over Nebraska, Missouri, that area. And downstream of it, again, we have rainfall over much of the East Coast. And of course, on the backside of it, we do have snowfall over the central and northern plains. This area's snowfall will track off to the north and east into places like Iowa and Wisconsin throughout the day. In fact, let's play this forward a little bit and see what happens to both of these systems. And we can see as we get into Thursday afternoon, we have some convective activity here over Kentucky. And what's hard to make out here, because what's the difference between what we're seeing in the mid Atlantic, right, versus what we're seeing in Kentucky? There's going to be some isolated severe weather here. And we're going to likely see the potential even for some tornadic activity. And we'll get into the details of why here in just a moment. And still off to the west of this time, we can see our low pressure tracking along southern California. That'll eventually track into the Four Corners region, delivering snowfall, places like Flagstaff, as the system marches off to the east. So as we get into Thursday night, we can see that low pressure system move into Arizona, again, delivering moderate to heavy snowfall there in northern portions of that state. And meanwhile, over Iowa, the snow is really getting going. In fact, some forecasters there are predicting 3 to 5 inches of snowfall for the state of Iowa from the system. Meanwhile, that shower and thunderstorm activity that was over the Ohio Valley begins to march eastward into the Appalachians as we move into Thursday night. Now, I do want to zoom into that system over the Central Plains and kind of talk about the timing of the development of those convective thunderstorms. Now, this begins around 11 a.m. Central Time for you guys. We can see some showers and thunderstorms popping up, maybe as early as late morning here, and kind of marching off to the north and east near portions of the Ohio Valley. Now, this becomes more widespread as we get into the afternoon. Now, as we see at 12 p.m., we start to see those storms really fire up here in the state of Illinois, southern Indiana, all along the Ohio Valley, basically east of Missouri. And as we move through the afternoon, we can see where that thunderstorm activity begins to spread into much of Indiana and even some more, perhaps, supercell activity developing here over Illinois and portions of northern Kentucky. And meanwhile, to the north and west of that low pressure system, we have the snowfall right from Nebraska into Iowa that's really getting going. As we push this forward in time, we can see how the showers and thunderstorms move through Indiana and Ohio. The snowfall activity begins to overspread Wisconsin, and we can see that change over from rain to freezing rain and sleet, eventually over to snowfall for even parts of the UP of Michigan. And that's going to take some time, but I would say for you guys from Nebraska to Iowa, up through much of Wisconsin and the UP of Michigan, I would say a general 2 to 4 inches of snowfall for you guys, with a few isolated locations maybe getting 5 or 6 inches from this event. So there are a couple of factors that go into this severe weather event that's taking place Thursday afternoon. And one of the key ingredients that we need for this is that we need changing winds with height, and we need those winds at the top of the troposphere to be much faster than those at the surface. And we've got that here Thursday afternoon. You see this purple region here kind of feeding into that area that's going to be experiencing some severe thunderstorms. And where you see the purple, those are winds over 120 miles per hour at the top of the troposphere. Notice also that those winds are running from west to east on this map. Now, by contrast, if we look at the surface, we can also see the winds here kind of moving directly out of the south. And what that's doing is that's helping to bring not only Gulf moisture, but that's in contrast to the winds we're seeing at the top of the troposphere. It's kind of like spinning a quarter, right? You got this force from two different directions that cause that spin in the atmosphere. So the change of winds with height, whether that be the speed or the direction, that's going to help aid the wind shear that we have available to the storm systems here. And not only that, we have a significant amount of moisture moving into the area. We're talking about dew points in the 50s for this particular event. And there's another factor really working into this. We have temperature contrast horizontally around the surface, right? So if you were to move from, let's say, a place like Kentucky back to Iowa, where they're seeing snowfall, there's a temperature change there of 30 to 60 degrees, right, across that area. But as you move up in the atmosphere, there's also a temperature gradient. You can see here over parts of Illinois, extending back into Indiana, Ohio, even parts of Kentucky, we have colder temperatures aloft even. So, yeah, we have those 50 and 60-degree temperatures at the surface, but we also have this colder air, maybe up around 5 or 6,000 feet in the atmosphere. And all these factors are leading to more instability in the atmosphere and the development of these convective thunderstorms as we get into Thursday afternoon. In fact, the National Weather Service is showing a slight risk of severe thunderstorms over this region here of the Ohio Valley. And with it, there is a slight risk of tornadoes in this region. But mainly what we can expect here is hail, maybe some strong gusty winds over 60 miles per hour, and isolated tornado activity. Now, as we get beyond Thursday into Friday morning, you can see the low pressure that went through California on Thursday is now over the Four Corners area, delivering snowfall to the Intermountain West. So places like western Colorado are picking up on the snowfall. Northern portions of New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah are picking up on the snow as well. So we talked about the 2 to 4 inches, right, over the central plains into the Midwest. I would say, generally speaking, we have about a 6 to 12-inch snowfall over the Intermountain West, the highest elevations, of course, receiving over a foot of snow. Now, eastward of this low pressure system, as we get into, let's say, New England, the upper Great Lakes region, we're going to see another area of maybe 1 to 3 inches of snowfall that develops. And this will be a quick hitter for you guys. We're talking about a period of maybe 3 to 6 hours of snowfall for many of you in New England. In fact, as we step this forward, you'll see how quick of a hitter this is. It's like a burst of snowfall as that rain changes to snow over the Great Lakes. Again, mainly snowfall over upstate New York and much of New England. But watch how quickly the system moves out to sea. It's very quick. And as we move into Saturday, you'll notice that there is showers and thunderstorms possible over the southeast, but things become remarkably quiet as we get into the weekend. But will it stay that way? There is some light snow and rainfall over Washington State and Oregon. We kind of see that here as we get into Saturday. There will be ridging building over the west. And in fact, as we go a little bit forward in time, you'll notice that the precipitation really pushes to the north here, and we can see indications of the ridge here over California. And in fact, as we get into early next week, places like Los Angeles down to San Diego will be dry through at least Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. One thing you'll notice is the development of a low pressure system off the coast of the Carolinas, possibly as we get into Sunday. And the models are kind of jumping all over the place right now as to the position of the low pressure system and also where the rain snow line will set up. I think it's good to compare models from time to time. So let's find a good place to do that. Now, if we press this forward in time to maybe 7 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday morning, we can see where we have rain over the Carolinas, possibly rain changing to snow over northern Virginia, say basically north of Charlottesville, going upwards, let's say to Winchester. Even DC could be rainfall at this time. In fact, it's very likely with how warm and marginal the temperatures will be for this event. But back into Pennsylvania, much of Maryland, even up into southern portions of New York, there could be an area of snowfall early Sunday morning. And the latest model run is taking it closer to the coast here, so we could see rain changing to snow in places like DC and Baltimore. And even over southern New Jersey, we could get moderate to heavy snowfall as we get into Sunday afternoon in particular. Now, this particular model run is showing snow over the eastern shore of Virginia as we get into Sunday night, but snowfall continuing over western Pennsylvania, western New York. We could see decent totals, right? We could see maybe 3 to 5 inches for this event in parts of Pennsylvania. And this particular model is showing snowfall being thrown back into New Jersey as we get into Sunday night. Now, the low pressure really gets going Sunday night into Monday morning. You see that pressure gradient really tighten off the coast there. Places like Nantucket will probably be getting some very high winds and bad surf, right, from this event. But also some light snow being thrown back into parts of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, perhaps even as far west as Connecticut here with this particular run. But if we were to compare it to the previous run, you can see how far it's jogged to the north and east, right? And each model run has been different. I think that's important to state here. But we should also compare this European model run to the American model run. Now, this is the latest run of the American model, and we can see where the rain snow line is a bit further to the south. So, along the I 64 corridor near Charlottesville would be that rain snow line. That also means is that DC, Baltimore, you guys would be all snow even at the start and remain all snow probably for the event. Places across central Virginia, according to the American model, places like Lynchburg, perhaps back to Roanoke, would be all snow. Richmond, you guys changing from rain to snow in this event. And this would be a major mid Atlantic snowstorm actually setting up here. Places like Virginia Beach, perhaps changing the snow from this event. I do have my doubts because, again, we don't have the tremendous cold air in place that we had back on the 24th of January, or even compared to that event during the 31st of January that was further to the south. Again, we had much colder air in place at that time. The temperatures here are going to be very marginal. And I think the European model is picking up on this better than the American model. And if the low pressure were to attract this close to the coast here, we would likely see that rain snow line actually go further back inland. I'd be very surprised with the marginal temperatures we have in place if that low pressure wouldn't actually bring more of those warmer temperatures inland and change that snow back to rain. But either way, we have an interesting setup here when looking at either the American model or the European model. And there is the possibility of significant snowfall for a place like DC or Baltimore. And according to the American model, perhaps even for New York City, extending north and east into places like Boston. But time will tell with these model runs. There'll probably be greater agreement as we get into the day Friday, especially. The problem with the forecast at the moment is that low pressure system that we're seeing over the East Coast is going to be the remnants of what's actually going over California today. And for that reason, we're going to have a better idea, of course, as we get into maybe the Thursday model runs and especially the Friday model runs. But what's going to happen for Central Virginia and Northern Virginia to get snowfall from this event, and the snowfall is going to have to come down at a very heavy rate, with temperatures marginal around 33, 34 degrees for that snowfall to actually accumulate. I have greater confidence for places around DC, Baltimore. I think the temperatures will be cold enough for at least snowfall to occur there. And even though temperatures would be colder into places like New Jersey and New York State, there's less confidence that the precipitation will be that far to the north. Now, if we look at the temperatures here during the height of the storm, you'll notice that they're this light green color over central Virginia, extending into southern Pennsylvania, even. And that usually is indicative of low to mid 30s here on this map. So snowfall rates again would have to be quite heavy to actually accumulate, especially with the temperatures reaching the 60s this week. Now, behind the system, we can see some cold Arctic air trying to come back into the United States here, moving into the northern Great Plains, down into places like Iowa that just received the snowfall. So, as we move beyond Sunday, what happens to that cold Arctic air? Well, it does propagate off to the east with time, and that low pressure system will help to bring down that cold Arctic air into the southeast as we get into Tuesday morning. And we can see this here as we move from Monday into Tuesday, that cold air moving down into the Gulf states, right? Maybe as far south as the Gulf of Mexico. So if we're looking at places like Mobile, Alabama, you guys could be sub freezing again Tuesday morning. And even over portions of northern Florida, we could see those temperatures go below 32 degrees. And even over portions of northern Florida, we could see those temperatures drop below freezing Tuesday morning. Now, the coldest Arctic air looks to be staying in southern Canada here. It's not going to really move into the Midwest and the Mid Atlantic, but it will kind of move into the Northeast again. So temperatures will be cold in New York State, extending eastward into Maine as we get into early next week. And beyond Tuesday, we can see how those temperatures begin to warm again over the southern plains. And that will push off to the east once again, likely warming areas in the southeast and mid Atlantic as we move throughout the week. So, will we see a pattern change towards the end of February? All indications are that we will, especially as we get out maybe 10 days from now. Now, what I wanted to do with you guys is actually draw out the trough ridge pattern currently that we have in place. Now, this is broadly speaking what we have in place. We have this trough that's over the West Coast currently, bringing in those cooler temperatures and also the stormy weather right to the West Coast. But we also have this large ridge that's building in the Eastern Pacific. And then further downstream, of course, we have this other trough that's well off the coast of Eastern North America. Now, if we compare this to the forecast for the 28th, there is a big difference between the two. Now, this particular model run is showing the ridge beginning to move into the West Coast. And what that means is we could have warmer temperatures for places like Washington State down to California. And we could also have cooler temperatures into places like the Midwest and Mid Atlantic once again. And that means that overnight lows could be below freezing for several nights in the Southeast. One of the things you might hear about on other channels are teleconnections. And if we look at two locations in particular, one over the Northern Atlantic that I've got boxed here to the right, and one over the Eastern Pacific into the West Coast. These are two important areas that kind of indicate whether or not cold air will actually come east of the Rockies and affect the eastern United States. The place over the northern Atlantic that you see to the right is called the NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation. And the big takeaway here is that around low pressure systems, if you see a very small temperature gradient, or a very small height gradient in this case, that's indicative of a very weak NAO, and that's considered going negative. And then if you have warming along the West Coast and Washington State and Oregon, we call that the Pacific North American Oscillation. And when that area is warm, we consider it to be positive. Now, when you have both of those set up the way they are, where the PNA, the Pacific North American Oscillation, is positive and the North Atlantic Oscillation is negative, this is what we get. We get cold air that drains out of Canada into the mid Atlantic. And one other thing that's coming into play here that we can't clearly see is that over Siberia, what's projected here in this model run, there's going to be a warm push of air into Siberia, and that's going to actually push into the Arctic Circle as we get into the later portion of this month. And that could also push more of that cold air from the Arctic down into the United States. Now, all of that remains to be seen. This again is 10 days out, and these forecasts will likely change again, and even the timing of these cold air outbreaks. And maybe this map won't even look anything like this as we get into the end of February. But there are indications that this will happen. I do believe by the early part of March, we will have colder outbreaks that are more significant, perhaps not as cold as what we saw during the middle portion of January into early February. But I do believe we'll have a colder outbreak that lasts several days once again, perhaps extending down to portions of the Midwest and Mid Atlantic for maybe a 3 to 5 day period as we get towards the beginning of March. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you enjoy this kind of content, please like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And of course, if you have any questions about what we talked about, whether it's the teleconnections, right, talking about the NAO or the PNA teleconnections, I'll be more than happy to answer those questions. But I do want to say I will go live this weekend if this storm actually develops into something significant along the East Coast. And if I do go live, I'd love to have you guys there with me, looking at these traffic cams, looking at the local radar and the forecast, and seeing how things change in real time. Otherwise, have a great week. Bye for now.